Okay, so welcome to BridgesCast episode 1, Experiences of Lockdown. I'm Scott from Bridges. We've got a couple of really cool guests here today. Evi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, really excited to be here. So I'm Evi. I'm a major trauma survivor and I also work for Bridges. Scott is my great colleague, and then there is another great friend of mine, Claire.
Hi, I'm Claire. I'm a cancer survivor and I live with long-term lung disease and a few other things as well. But I also deliver training for Bridges. And yeah, it's really nice to be here to talk to you guys.
Oh, cool. So cool to see you. I miss you.
So yeah, I'm Scott. I also work for Bridges. I am a stroke survivor, lost my vision as a result of my stroke. So we've kind of thought it would be really good to just get on Zoom, as everyone does nowadays, to just have a chat about our experiences of lockdown and kind of how we found lockdown really, and also how we're finding coming out of lockdown as well, because it's a bit weird for everyone coming out of lockdown. Yep. So yeah, how have you kind of found it, guys? How's it been? It's been a bit different for all of us, I think, hasn't it? So yeah, Claire, how's it been?
Well, like my lung condition means that I'm in that extremely highly vulnerable, whatever they've decided to call it, group. So, I mean, I knew that before they sent us into lockdown, really. So I came away from London, where I normally live, came and stayed with family. Kind of early March, so a little bit before everyone else went into lockdown, and I haven't come back since. So it's been, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it, to put it into like it's been like this or like this, because obviously like life is full of ups and downs. What I did think that was interesting, I was thinking about it the other day, that it's actually been a bit like when you get diagnosed with a condition. It was a bit like that initial like, this is happening, and there's a shock factor, and you're like, everything feels a bit new, and you're like, what is going on? This is crazy. I've got all these new kind of restrictions, and I've got to learn the lay of the land and how to manage. And then there's a kind of an adjustment period where it starts to normalize a bit, and you get used to that being your life. And then I think you start kind of like adapting a bit more. And it kind of just really felt like kind of being diagnosed with an illness. And in some ways, in that respect, I kind of felt like, oh, this feels a bit familiar, weirdly. You know, like it didn't feel, everyone else was like, this is the craziest thing that's ever happened. I was like, not really the craziest thing that's ever happened to me. A few other crazy things. So it was a weird mix. I don't know. How about you, Evi? What did you?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I was thinking about it as well. And I had the same. Funnily enough, I compared it to my car crash as well, how everything just turned upside down, and I had to find a new normal, the shock factor, as you mentioned as well. I was really scared. I didn't know what I can do, what I cannot do, who am I going to affect if in case I get ill. Plus my family is abroad. I'm from Czech Republic, so I've been living in England for 17 years, so I couldn't really go and see them and make sure they are okay. And what I really found familiar in this situation with this was the roller coaster of feelings. As Claire mentioned, the initial shock factor, then you start to feel like everything starts falling into place, you find your rhythm, you find your routine. But then, and I don't know whether it was because of my previous depressions, I found out I would start getting depressed and noticing it, and it wasn't enough anymore. I really missed people, really struggled with that. And then I had to self-isolate as well because there were signs. So I found that really tricky, and I was really worried about other people. And then starting to coming out of it. But I just took the approach like I did with my car crash, finding the new normal and focusing on every day. So yeah, it's been really weird. A lot of emotions, and it didn't have to take from month to month. It could be all of these in one day. So mental, but normal for me, as Claire said. Yeah. Scott, what about you?
Yeah, so I mean, well, just to kind of comment on you, Evie, for anyone that knows you, you love to give hugs. So I can imagine for you not being able to hug anyone for the last however many months must have just been absolute,
Awful.
yeah, a killer for you. So, yeah, for me, it's been really weird because, so I and my wife kind of both had some of the signs before the lockdown started. So we had to kind of isolate before lockdown started, and yeah, so we live in our so there's me, my wife, and my young daughter living in our flat, and it there was kind of a weird like novelty factor in the beginning, and then all of a sudden it just hit like a bit of a car crash, um, to excuse the analogy, and it was just like, wow, my thirst for information or thirst for anything tangible was just, I just found myself poring over news articles about what was going on, or like, what was the latest information, what were the latest statistics, but also just weird things like trying to, well, I guess it's not weird, but trying to get like an online shopping delivery and stuff, was like a real concern. Yeah, so I'm blind as a result of my stroke. So for me, getting out to the shops is tricky at the best of times. But then when you can't do that because of social distancing and things, then becomes really difficult. So yeah, it was really difficult in kind of the peak of lockdown.
Yeah, I
Um,
totally hear you about the looking for information and trying to get
mm,
clarity of information, which is really hard. I think if you have any condition, I guess it depends on your temperament, but for me, certainly I'm the same. I want to know everything I can about it. And it was kind of part of accepting that there wasn't information, accepting that there wasn't even the professional, the experts didn't know what the outcome would be. And it was just, I found that really hard trying to, and particularly when, they make broad sweeping statements of the people who were dying all had underlying conditions. And I'm like, that doesn't help if you've got an underlying condition. It's not reassuring. That's like the opposite. And yeah, the information and how it was presented was very different to anything I've had before with my health. So that was a real challenge for me as well.
So did you find that it kind of, in terms of your condition and you then as an individual, Claire, how have you found that this whole process has affected you as an individual? Like, are there kind of any negatives or any positives that have kind of come out of the process?
I think, it's kind of changed. I think what it's shown me is, I've lived with my condition. I had cancer diagnosed when I was 17, and then a couple of years later, because all the treatment was on my lungs, a couple of years later I was diagnosed with this progressive lung condition as a result of all the treatment I'd had. So given my age away, I've lived with that for 20 years now, or over 20 years. So what this has made me realize is all those coping strategies that I have developed and how I manage physically, emotionally, kind of socially, all those things, because they've been removed, I've suddenly realized the importance of them. So it's kind of, in some ways, it's been really hard because I've realized how much I rely, over time, I've built up a really good network of people around me who I know are good for me, who understand, who don't kind of enable me, don't treat me as a victim, or I've got a really good group of people around me. So to have all that removed suddenly was really tough. But I guess the flip side of that is it shows me that I've done quite well in building that up around me. It's a really odd one in terms of it's highlighted the kind of how I've personally coped with my condition by taking most of it away. Yeah, I think, as well with my condition, what's been tricky is I was actually in hospital for January and a bit of February. Like, I had a bad flare up of my lungs, really, really bad pneumonia. So in order to recover, normally I would go through a certain process, and I know what that is. I do it quite regularly, and that would involve being able to push myself a little bit more every day and do a little bit, make myself go a bit further for a walk or visit someone who was a bit further away and give myself motivation to kind of get back to life. And of course all that's gone as well, and it's been interesting. I've realized I definitely need outside motivations, something I've learned about myself. Yeah, it's interesting. Scott, did you have to shield formally, or was it more on a practical?
No, so I mean, when I had symptoms, I had to shield for like, what was it, 14 days. But then I found myself, just because of the practicalities of taking in exercise. So we live in Southeast London. We actually live really close to a really nice outdoor space. But me, my wife and my daughter, when we first started lockdown, my daughter wasn't walking. So it was me, my wife and my daughter. I'm not great at independent mobility. So my wife was sighted guiding me. So we were kind of two abreast and a pram on quite narrow pavements, and people trying to like avoid you, or you're trying to avoid people on pavements, was really, really tough. So I was like, I just don't want that anxiety. So I would find myself avoiding going out, which was actually one of the worst things for me from kind of a mental health point of view. And I still, I'm kind of doing that to a certain extent. My kind of physical, my physical health has probably suffered as a result of all of this process, just because I avoid going out and stuff. Yeah, just because I can't, the whole kind of social distancing measures when you go for a walk and stuff is really tricky. But it's been kind of tricky from that point of view. But what's been really nice is that I've been working from home for the whole time. So for the last, what are we now, 4 months, 5 months? I completely, one of the things of lockdown is you lose track of time, don't you? But I've got to spend that whole time with my daughter, who is like 20 months, 21 months. So I've got to see her improve, like change over that time, which if I were going into work every day, I wouldn't have got to see that change. So that's been like amazingly valuable for me, and I think our bond strengthened as a result of that. So that's been like a really cool positive as part of lockdown. But yeah, there have been some massive like challenges, and I think me, like Evi, am somebody who really values interaction with other people. And it's not to say that I don't value that contact with my wife and my daughter, but I think they're probably getting a bit fed up of me by now as well. But yeah, just having that contact with other people is really important to me. And what about you, Evi? What have you kind of found?
I think one of the good things about me is I'm always like full glass. I'm not even half full. I'm full. So I do bounce back, and I do find positives on everything I possibly can. Otherwise, I don't think I can cope with it. So the good things for me were that I managed, and I think that's, I suppose, like Claire mentioned earlier, just using what I had learned on my journey on recovery, which has been 5 years ago now. So I just used the same things, just take it day by day, because the beginnings were really hard, the overwhelming panic of not knowing what's happening, no one really having any answers, and not only for the first month, but for even now, I still don't know if I can go to a doctor or not. And plus, what didn't really help is Czech Republic went into a lockdown, massive lockdown, month before England. Plus, the restrictions were really huge. It was mandatory. It was law. It was set as a law. You need to wear a face mask. So I was getting informations from my family abroad who were shocked about how laid back the situation is over here. So that didn't help me and my worries either, because I was thinking, oh my God, you know, in comparison how few people were there ill. And I know it's much smaller country, like ridiculously smaller, but still in the concept of knowledge, it seemed to me they knew much more and they were much more proactive than over here. And then what didn't help also was if anything happens, I'm not able to fly over and see them and support them. There's just no way. And but I could always flip it on the good side. And yes, I lost my swimming. I couldn't go for swim, which is one of the few exercises I can do now because I'm quite limited. And so I really missed that. But then I started with yoga. So it actually opened. I started to see it. Okay, what I cannot do now, but what can I do then instead? And I managed to find new hobbies, new things. I reconnected with many other new people that I haven't spoken to for a while. And I think not only me, a lot of people, you hear it all over the places that, oh, I've spoken with these, and everyone going into mindfulness and being a bit more thoughtful. And I really like that about it. So I do think that there's something good coming out of it. Hopefully for a really long time, it will stay with people. But it's being another learning curve, just a reminder as well not to take things for granted a little bit and use your skills. And you're learning again a lot about yourself and who your friends are really, who you can get support from. So negative, positive, again, very mixed feelings.
I completely agree that it's kind of really forced people, and me included, to be really creative about how you can do the things that you know work for you, or whether it's work life or social life or, you know, self-care or all those things that we sort of fall into patterns with without realizing we're doing it. When you kind of suddenly have your options limited so much, it really makes you think more creatively. And actually I found that I knew, for me, having a structure and a reason, like even if it's just one thing to achieve in a day, if I get to the end of a day and I feel I haven't done that, I know, you know, I fall back into feeling ill. Like I literally feel unwell from it if I haven't like done something, got to, you know, had a bit of structure. So it was really important that I set that up quite early. And I found actually I've had more structure now than I do normally. Like it sounds ridiculous, but like I get out of bed in the morning relatively early. I have a breakfast. There are days in normal life, before and after COVID, it's all going to be, isn't it? But that, you know, I'd lie in half the morning because I didn't have anything to do till lunchtime, and now I'm like, no, I know that's not going to fly in lockdown, because it just makes, exactly like you, Evie, like my mood will just shoot down if I don't make sure that I feel like I've got a bit of a purpose in that day.
Yeah, totally.
So in self-care terms, it's actually, like you say, it's helped me a bit too.
Yeah, and I found out that I actually work more than in an office. Not that I didn't work in office, so that's not what I mean. I always work in office, but I actually work more. I'm like, oh, and I can do this bit and just this bit, and you add another half an hour there, but actually I end up feeling more satisfied with what I did. I picked up a language. I'm learning a language that I wanted to do for years now. So watch out, Italians.
See, that's interesting. I found that's been the opposite for me. I have found that I have had less structure. I found like when I was going into the office, I would have more, like I perhaps I need more of those external factors to kind of govern my life a bit more, I guess. Like, and I think I realized this. So one of my previous jobs was working from home, and I realized to myself then that perhaps working from home wasn't the kind of lifestyle for me, because I'm not great at kind of self-regulating some of those things.
But can I ask you, Scott? Do you think do you need the structure? Because if it works for me or Claire to have some sort of a structure, doesn't mean that it works for someone else. Because I mean, we work together, and I think you work awesomely well. Yes, you're little, because you have a little baby at home, so your working hours are more spread. But if it works for you, do you think you need structure?
I think I do. So I don't feel as if I have been as productive since COVID has happened, and I think part of that has been because I haven't had the whole kind of ritual of getting up in the morning, going to the office and doing work. Like, this is where work happens, and do work and come home, and then this is where personal life happens, and it's all kind of become one, which I have struggled with. I think my life works better in segments that are probably better not mixed. I think, but it kind of, it's really interesting. When I was recovering from my stroke, I did a lot of work on building like a metaphorical toolkit of coping strategies for different scenarios, and it's whenever I experience like a low point in my life, or I struggle with a period in my life, if I go back to that toolkit, I always find that actually things get better. And it's such a stupid thing that I always forget. It's a bit like exercise, isn't it? Is we all forget that if we do exercise, we feel much better. And then when we like achieve a goal where we lose some weight, and then we're like, oh, we've lost the weight, we don't need to do exercise anymore, and we put weight on. We're like, oh, that's brilliant, we've lost the weight, well, let's stop doing exercise now, and we regress. And I feel like my kind of mental health and kind of how I look after myself, my coping strategies are all kind of the same vein, and I forget that actually this is just how life needs to be. So yeah, it's really interesting.
It makes me sorry.
I was just going to say, I find that my short-term memory for what works and what helps, exactly like you. I'm like, oh yeah, it's almost like if I fall on it by accident, or someone forces me to be a bit sociable, or to reach out to just to talk to someone, to say, oh, I'm feeling a bit rubbish today, and then by the end of that conversation you immediately feel better, and yet I will have spent hours resisting doing it. You're like, why do we do this? I mean, it is, but like you say, it's not, I know that they're there. I know that those, from years of managing health, I know I've got little mantras. I know that I've said to myself at the very depths of rubbish treatment I've had, where I've just felt so awful. I remember the only thing I could come up with is like, at some point in the future you will feel different, and that's all I used to say to myself. Like, it just, and actually every minute that passes, you're 1 minute closer to that point. So like, this is like, and it was just I was so physically ill that I couldn't do anything, or I just had this thought that I was like, hold on to that. And that's applicable wherever you are, isn't it? Whatever you're going through, and it doesn't have to be illness. It's just like, at some point you'll feel different, and you're heading towards that point. And so it is picking up all these tricks. I think it's really, I mean, in some ways, maybe we've got more coping strategies from having been challenged than people who haven't had that.
I was just thinking that, I mean, that's going to sound horrible. Not that I wished I had the accident. I really don't. It was awful and painful, and all my body was broken. But here we are, my silver linings and positives. I do feel just this tiny little bit luckier because I had that experience, like you just mentioned, Claire, that I can reach into those skills that I sadly had to learn, but they are there and I can dip into it, and that's cool. That's probably the only cool thing, no, except my new friends and my job. That's the third cool thing about this horrible thing.
Hashtag silver linings, isn't that one of the mantras of COVID life? So have you guys had any interactions with healthcare professionals like throughout this period? Because that's been one of the things, isn't it? Is that like, yeah, healthcare interactions have changed as a result of this. You
Yeah.
now can't go and see your GP face to
Yeah.
face, or consultants have changed how they operate as well. Like, have either of you had any
I
interactions?
I had it's nothing to do with therapy or anything. It was actually a dentist thing. And for about a month and a half, I had this incredible pain in my tooth, in my side of the jaw, that actually resulted in migraines and swelling, and it was awful. Like, I ended up eating 10 ibuprofens a day, plus paracetamols, just to numb it. Because when I tried to call someone, nothing was happening. I wasn't serious enough to be seen, and which I appreciate. But like, I need to function. I can't be drugged up all the time, but I couldn't do anything, and no one was really giving me answers. And finally, when they opened the surgeries, kind of, I still had a consultation over the phone because I was still not serious enough. So I was given double dose of antibiotics, and I was told that as soon as I can, I need to go to a dentist to probably have the either root canal or tooth, depends, because it's apparently serious. So it's like, what do I do? I still haven't been to dentist. I mean, pain is gone, kind of. It's still little there, but it's better. So I rather not go than go. And then the other one was when I had to go with some private health issues, and I had to have a phone call with the GP. And because I had to move through coronavirus, my GP actually wasn't in the location of where I was, and I wasn't registered there, so I couldn't speak to anyone about my problem, and I actually had to end up going to A&E, and that was really tough for me, because I don't want to that was really tricky, because I don't want to overload A&E. I didn't think it's serious enough for me to end up in A&E. I felt really embarrassed. Then I did end up in A&E because no one would see me, because they wouldn't register me. And then they were trying to ask me through these huge plastic, there's a waiting room full of very ill people. I didn't see any 2 meters, I swear to God. I know there was like few seats empty, but you sit 50 centimeters behind a person. So I was really conscious, really nervous about this. Plus I lived with Kelly, with my friend, who is heavy asthmatic. So I was really self-conscious of bringing anything in back to her. So it was quite traumatic from all sides for me. And then I ended up talking to this guy behind this plastic glass in a waiting room, like hundreds of people, and he's shouting at me to describe him, what's wrong with me. And I'm like, I'm not telling you, this is very private. This is my private bits. Can I have a pen and paper? No, you need to tell me. And you need to shout at him, because bless this guy, he can't hear you. And I'm telling him, I'm not sharing with 100 people in this area. I just moved in about my problem. Yeah. So I eventually, when I didn't budge, I did ended up writing it down. And it was really scary. It's, for me personally, very scary. I didn't care if I'm going to get COVID or not. But I cared, if I do get it, I will pass it on to someone, whether it's a shop, and that's still with me. Every time I interact somewhere, whether it's a shop or anything, I'm just thinking, am I going to infect someone? I'm really, and I never been like that. Like Scott mentioned before, I'm a hugger. I love people. I want to hug everyone. I want to talk to everyone. And now I can't. So this was my experience with medical professionals here. And I still don't know if I can call them.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because obviously the three of us are involved in Bridges, and it's kind of, we believe so strongly about putting people at the center of their care and personalizing it and making it, and it does feel like a lot of the restrictions, and kind of necessarily so sometimes, you kind of, it's not that in that emergency situation you could do much else, but all that stuff about kind of dignity and confidentiality and making people feel like an individual, that it has been challenged, hasn't it, by the restrictions. I think I've actually not had to, I mean, I spoke to my consultant early on, and he's like, I don't want you going anywhere near a hospital or a clinic or anywhere I think because of the state of my lungs, it would be pretty catastrophic, I think, if I got it. So I've done all of my appointments by phone. So I've had I've spoke to my consultant, which actually I found, because I know him and I know the way he speaks, and I wasn't trying to read too much. The fact it was over the phone didn't make too much difference to me. And actually found talking to him really reassuring, because it's a relationship I've had for years. It's someone I trust. He knows my specific, physiology and problems. And so I felt his advice was much more personalized in terms of how to keep myself safe at the moment from COVID, as well as we could do all the other checkups we normally do. But I found that a really good, much more reassuring way of getting advice about what I should and shouldn't be doing at the minute. But it was interesting because I then had a call, actually it was only last week, I had a follow-up call from a consultant who I'd seen when I was in hospital in January, and it was supposed to be a 6-week follow-up. So that's now about 7 months later.
Oh my God.
They were very apologetic, and to be fair, I mean, I've recovered relatively well. So had I been worried, I would have got back in touch. It wasn't, I was kind of, but yeah. So obviously there've been big delays. But what was interesting as well is because I didn't know, I think I'd met this consultant once. I didn't know her. And what I was really aware of was on the phone, and I'm sure I was going to say to Scott, like, this must be something that I'm sure you have insight into, but without the visual cues, suddenly when she would be talking about something and then she'd go silent, and I was like, oh my God, maybe she'd see something on the screen that's like terrible news, or maybe there's some test results on there that she suddenly doesn't know what to say, because it's all, like the anxiety of what's happening in that silence was, and it took a while before, and I eventually went, hello? And she went, oh no, I'm still here. I'm sorry. I was just reading the letters. Sorry, just give me, just a minute. I'm just looking at your notes. Nothing to worry about. I was like, oh, thank goodness. But I think you don't realize that what you get from being in the room with someone is a sense of reassurance. You've obviously got that, the kind of facial feature. You can read their expressions and all that stuff. And I think that's something that you can lose easily in a phone call. And I was going to say to Scott, I mean, I don't know how you manage that on a regular basis.
Yeah, so in we'll just call it pre-COVID. We'll call it PC, DC, and AC. Pre-COVID, during COVID, and after COVID. So yeah, pre-COVID, I think I just got frustrated with people a lot, because they would just do stuff like that a lot of the time, and oftentimes I'll go into a consultation and we'll say, look, and it's amazing how many times you go into a consultation room and they don't even realize that I can't see, even though I'm walking in with a massive white stick right out in front of me, and they don't realize that I can't see. I often question the vision of some of the people I'm going in to see sometimes. But yeah, they don't realize that you can't see, or I don't know. But I'll be very upfront and say, look, I can't see. If you're gonna go silent for a period of time, or going to have a look at some letters or something, can you please tell me, because it's really unnerving when you go silent, or look at letters. And I will oftentimes do that same thing over the phone. But I've had a consultation, so I've been kind of going through some neurology investigations for a while now. And I saw this neurology, I think it was back at the beginning, saw this neurologist back at the beginning of the year. And I saw him face to face, and he was a really nice guy. And he had a couple of, as they do, had a couple of underlings with him. And the couple of underlings had a really, really poor bedside manner, and I got really shirty in the kind of face-to-face thing, because he wasn't pulling them up on their poor bedside manner. So I kind of tore them apart a bit in the face-to-face consultation. And I kind of said something to him as well, because I felt that he should be pulling them up a bit. But I had a telephone consultation with him during when would it have been? I think it was in June. And he phoned me up, and it was a replay of the consultation that I'd had back in January. And I was like, either he's not read his notes from his previous consultation, and admittedly, there's not been anything able to happen since he saw me in January, because he'd ordered some tests to be done and stuff, but none of those things have been able to happen. But get on the phone with me and say, look, I'm really sorry, nothing's been able to happen since I saw you in January. Let's try and get these things rebooked, and I'll see you again in such and such time. But instead, he tried to go through the appointment that he'd done in January. I just sat there getting more and more frustrated. But yeah, you're right, Claire. It was kind of those things again where he's clearly trying to read through like the referral letter that had come to him while he's on the phone. So there's just dead space over the phone, and then he's kind of trying to absorb information while it's coming in. And yeah, I appreciate that they don't have much time for kind of clinics and stuff, but you also don't have all of the time of people kind of shuffling in and out of your waiting room, taking coats on and off and all that kind of stuff. So there must be some opportunity to claw back a bit of time, or people don't answer their phones and things like that. It was a bit frustrating, and I appreciate it. It's probably not optimal for them, because they like to be face to face with their patients. But actually, what was really nice was the fact that I didn't have to go into central London. I didn't have to trawl all the way into central London for what's effectively a 10-minute appointment. I didn't have to travel 2 hours. Like an hour each way for a 10-minute appointment. I could have a phone call in the comfort of my own home.
For sure. Particularly if your condition, I get kind of quite bad fatigue with mine, and just sometimes the thought of getting up to town and even just walking, hospitals are big places, going up to the clinic and then being sent for bloods and then an X-ray, and then I think people underestimate. That's more walking than I would, when I'm feeling really ropey, that's a lot of walking for me. And it's exhausting. I was going to say one of the downsides is that I feel with them not being able to see you, as much as me not being able to see their face, sometimes I know when I've been in clinic and I've kind of thought I was doing all right, my consultant takes one look at me and is like, why are you breathing like that? I'm like, breathing like what? It's just the vision. So there's a part of me that wonders, are things being missed because they can't see me, things I might not even think are an issue, or that kind of it's just an added underlying anxiety, isn't it, of that you already have around health stuff, but kind of extra questions that you have. And we already have a lot of questions, right? Going into appointments, there's already a lot.
We're in there with our reams of paper.
Exactly.
And they think, oh no, she's been on Google again.
Google. I've printed out the whole of Google, and I'm going to ask you all about it. Yeah.
So Evi, you said that you'd started yoga since lockdown. Are there any other like skills or habits that you picked up?
Well, yoga is not the first thing I picked up. The first thing I picked up was I thought, because I used to be really fit. I used to be a volleyball player and a swimmer, professional, and so I really missed it. And part of my volleyball training would be 3 hours, 3 times a week. And 1 hour was just run up and down hills, parks, stairs. It was huge, and I loved it. So I thought, I'm well enough now. I feel well enough. And I'm assuming we all put coronavirus weight on. So I thought, well, what I'm doing up to now, to this point, is actually not enough anymore. It's still not what I used to do or be able to do physically, but I'm well enough now to know that actually this effort is not good now. I can do more, just this little bit more. So I thought I'll pick up running. That didn't go very well. And I actually realized 5 days later that I can't run because of my knees. It's gone so bad that for about 2 weeks, I couldn't go down the stairs or up the stairs, or just simple walking was out of question. It was incredibly painful. So I thought I'd pick up doing stairs instead to get my bum in shape and my thighs. I thought I'm gonna look really gorgeous because I'm newly single, by the way, as well, a few months now. So I thought I'd get a bit in shape as well. That didn't work either with my knees. So I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? There's not much left with my arm and my weird pelvis. So swimming out of question, but apparently 19th of August, swimming pool is opening. So I'm really excited. I got my swimming gear ready. And then I tried meditation. It still doesn't work. Used to meditate massively. Then we had a chat with Scott about meditation and listening to these. What was it called, Scott? The thingy?
Headspace.
Yes, didn't work. So I went from. I just keep going. I get really frustrated about it. I get really angry with myself, with my body, with my weird legs and weird arm and pelvis, and I'm really cross. And 5 minutes later, I'm like stroking it and saying, "No, you're good. I love you. It's okay. We'll come up with something else." And my body's like, "Oh my God, she's crazy." And then. So I focus on yoga, and I actually found yoga incredibly useful and very helpful. And I can do a lot of passive movement, which I didn't realize with my arm, so I can actually, when I'm doing upward facing, is it upward facing dog? The thingy that you go with your head down, your bum up, and you like stand, so you're like a roof kind of shape. And in this position, I can have my arm up, which I normally never. So the passive movement is there, and that's really cool. And it's actually a massive boost. By the way, if any of you think yoga is easy, it's not. It's not. Even beginners, like baby yoga, is not easy. So just hard, and I can feel even my toes hurt after. I have muscles in my toes. But it's really cool. So I'm in love with yoga, and I just discovered there is a bicycle in the basement of this house. So I started cycling. I do need to reposition my seat massively because of the position of my arm on the bicycle. It actually is hurting my shoulder, the shoulder calf, and my arm. But I found a way. So I look a bit weird when I'm cycling, but I made it work. So I might take a photo one day and post it on our Instagram page.
Yeah, it sounds like it's exactly the same to me, that really it's just about trial and error, isn't it? With trying to find what works for you and really adapting. I think there's a point of, I'm like you, there's no way I could run anywhere. I might make 10 meters, but so knowing what isn't going to work and being willing to let go of it, which can be can be really sad, because if things you've done in the past, I was never like you. I was never very good at sport, but I used to play netball at school. I was tall enough they'd stick me in goal, and I was happy there. And there are ways that you could be active, and there is a part. I think there is part you have to kind of mourn that. It's really sad that you can't do those things anymore. But it's kind of, I've really adapted to. I'm living out in Surrey at the minute, and obviously it's a lot greener, and there's a beautiful woodland close by. And I found that I normally live in Tooting, and I'd kind of do these trying to get my pulmonary rehab into my life. So trying to get my oxygen drops when I walk, and it's a challenge. So I've had to really work around it, find ways that I can do it without that happening. And I used to just be like, right, I'm going to walk to this place because I need to do this, and it's built-in walks to kind of almost that were quite functional, and didn't ever really enjoy them because I was walking down busy high streets, and it was never. And I found actually walking for walking's sake has given me so much more motivation to do it, to go find somewhere that looks nice, to somewhere that makes you feel good. For me, I'm rubbish at meditation as well, so walking in a woodland is as good as I'm going to get at it. You know, it's really calm, it's really peaceful, it's kind of all consuming, you're not busy thinking of other things. So I think it is just about finding what works for you, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think what you said, letting it go, that's really crucial as well, because so many times, even in my recovery, I wanted to go back to what I was before and what I did before, and I got really upset and frustrated. And the same with coronavirus lockdown thing. I wanted to have the life I had before coronavirus. I wanted to meet my friends. I wanted to go to office. I wanted to go to cinema. I wanted to travel. And because I couldn't, I would get really, really frustrated. So it was really nice to be able to remind myself, okay, let's go. It's not happening. Let's do different things. So my next thing, guys, by the way, is I'm going to learn to play tennis. I used to play tennis. I was very bad, but very, very enthusiastic about it. So I know I can't use my right arm, by the way, I'm right-handed, but I'm going to teach myself to do it left-handed, by the way.
Mm.
Oh, I like to see, I'll wait to see the results, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see that on the Bridges Instagram soon.
Yeah, I have to buy a lot of tennis balls. They go all over.
It's interesting when we talk about like having to let go of things as well, though. It's kind of like, okay, we've accepted this and we move on. But I think it's a bit like the grief cycle, if you know that, like that kind of initially that shock and then getting really peed off, like really frustrated and angry and annoyed, and then probably a bit of depression, you know, and actually it's not a neat cycle either. You kind of swing between things, don't you? You go back and forward.
It's definitely not linear, is it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
But eventually arriving at acceptance and then maybe swinging back to anger for a little bit, but getting there, you know, getting there.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And not to give up, you know, just accept it and let's find something else, because there is always something else. What about you, Scott? Did you find something else?
Yeah, so I think mine have really been again kind of focused around doing stuff with my daughter. So one of the things that she used to do a lot with my wife Karis before BC, before Corona, is they used to go and do baby signing a lot, and it's something that they both have really loved and enjoyed, and it was something that I didn't
What's a baby signing? Sorry,
so
Scott.
it's kind of sign language for babies, but it's it's kind of them using sign language before they can speak, so they kind of use sign language. But when Corona hit, all of their in-person classes had to stop, obviously, so it moved to online. So they've kind of had these they kind of pre-recorded these sessions which you can watch every day. So they're like little videos you can watch every day, and then they have these different Zoom sessions that you can watch with the teacher, kind of different slots throughout the week. So my wife does some teaching over Skype to students. So what I do is when she's teaching is that me and Allegra will sit and watch either the online videos, or some of them coincide with when there's a face-to-face teaching session. So I've actually been doing a bit of learning baby sign, which is really cool because it's a nice thing that we can do together. So on a Saturday morning, we the two of us do like a bit of baby sign, which for a blind person is actually really hard, but the teacher is really good because she's she's really good at like stopping the session, and it gives me a really good description of what the different signs are. And Allegra is also really good at like helping me out with what the different signs are as well. But it's a really nice thing for us to be able to do, which I wouldn't have been able to do if it hadn't have kind of been for COVID. And then, I think, as we kind of mentioned, trying to do a bit more meditation-y type stuff. And then one of the other things that we're trying to do a bit more is on weekends, now that things are kind of easing a little bit more, is we'll always try and go somewhere on a Sunday. So we'll always try and go to like I don't know, like a National Trust property or somewhere like that, that we can go somewhere that we wouldn't necessarily have gone, and just get out and, go somewhere for the morning, which kind of gets me out and walking a bit more as well. So again, it's using that external motivation as well. So it's not me having to, or it's not just me having to motivate myself, but it's all three of us getting out, going somewhere, seeing somewhere quite nice and somewhere that I've never been before.
I think speaking of the online stuff that's become available, obviously as someone who has at times had to spend like months not leaving the house before, and like I said before, fatigue days, and I do I work with the charity that supports younger people with cancer going through cancer treatment as well, and I know we've moved all our online peer support stuff we've moved all our peer support online, and it's meant that people who otherwise would not be able to access the in-person events, like to come and meet other adult or young people with cancer, and have been able to access services that they wouldn't otherwise because of COVID, and actually it's meant, I think it's opened all our eyes to the fact that a lot of stuff can be delivered online. And so for people who are stuck indoors or immobile or just fatigue or whatever the reason is, it's meant that actually suddenly there's a whole world has opened up a little bit of. I did a whole forensic psychology course online because I'm a bit obsessed with true crime. It's one of my secret guilty pleasures, and I was like, it's the sort of thing I would have loved to do, but it would have meant like hacking up to Holborn for a whole evening once a week, and knowing me, I'm like, consistent. If you pay for a course and you can only go to half of it, it always feels like, And I was like, great, I can do this from my bed. It's brilliant. So there've been some things that have been really like, in some ways, I really hope that the world remembers that there are a whole raft of people who actually live in a kind of semi-lockdown state because of other reasons, for other, for illnesses, chronic illnesses and things. And that hopefully these services will keep continuing in this way, because it's really, really helpful. Not only this way, but it's great to have them as an option.
By the way, can I get the details for your course, please?
You're going to do some forensic psychology as well, Evi?
Maybe I'll start running my own course now.
Because we really we talked about it way back when you were still intuiting it, that how we both crazy about crime. We don't want to do crime, but just to talk.
Side interest, right?
So as we're kind of coming towards the end, do you guys have any top tips for anyone kind of coming out of lockdown who's maybe struggling a bit with the transition from lockdown to kind of coming, well, I say we're coming out of lockdown, who knows how things are going to progress, but do you like any kind of tips and tricks or things that you find useful?
If I can start, I find really useful knowing that I'm not alone feeling like this, that there are other people going through the same transition or similar transition, and that feeling up and down or good or struggling a little bit, finding the new normal, other people do it as well. And so whether it's just with family or friends, or as Claire mentioned, peer support groups, there are lots of things like that. And another tip that works for me is really trying to focus on what can I do rather than what I can't do, because I get very depressed sometimes still, and I do notice the signs now, so I try to stop it right at the beginning. And this helps me massively when I feel really low or I'm struggling. Okay, let's focus, even if it's one thing, like Claire mentioned earlier, one thing a day that you can do or focus on, and notice the positives. That is getting better. We will eventually get to our new normal or better days. It's like with illness, isn't it? It's never the same like it was, or most of the time, if we're lucky. It's not. It always at least gets better just this tiny little bit, and take it day by day if we can. I don't know.
No, you're right, completely. And it's amazing, isn't it, how much we tell ourselves that even when you have a horrible illness or something, you're like, oh, I'm not doing well enough, I'm not coping very well. You're like, I mean, how would someone cope? Well, this has been a massively anxiety producing situation. Of course, it's completely normal if you feel anxious about things changing and opening up again. Like, it would be, in some ways, it would be weird if you weren't a bit anxious and cautious about it. So, like, I guess knowing that, giving yourself a break without feeling worried is a good start. I would say for me as well, like, I am one of those people, I'm really unsure of how safe it is for me to be out and about. I mean, shielding is officially ended, but I know a lot of people in my boat are saying I'm not changing what I'm doing, because it's and at this point it really is about making those choices for yourself, isn't it? It's about what risks, like assessing the risks. What risks am I willing to take in order to preserve my mental health and my social life and my work life, whatever it might be, and just kind of allowing yourself to make that decision. But again, it's difficult without information. I'm not going to say it's easy, but for me it's been about, I'm aware I kind of want to broaden out what I'm doing, and I feel anxious about broadening out what I'm doing. So I'm kind of trying to, so this week I made it my thing. I've been going on walks out into the woods, and that's been lovely because you barely meet any people. Still wear my mask even when I'm just outside. But I've kind of been really, if I come across someone, I'm like, like diving into a bush to avoid people. Like, it's been a bit extreme. So I'm trying to kind of reassure myself by speaking with my doctors about what they think the risks are. And then also I've decided if I do one new thing a week. So this week I walked up the high street and back. I didn't go in any shops, but it was just like getting myself used to more people and it being busier and noisier, and everything feels, it actually really reminds me of coming out of hospital after a long stint as an inpatient. Like that, everything suddenly seems really loud and fast and busy, and you feel overstimulated. And it's a challenge. So I would say, like, maybe do that kind of one little challenge yourself to move out of your comfort zone a little bit, but only if you feel it's safe. Like, there's no, I don't think you should pressure yourself to do things because everyone else is. The other thing.
It has to feel right with you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It has to sit well with you and yourself personally. What about you, Scott?
So for me, I think it probably comes back to a thing we were talking about a little bit earlier on of looking back at what has worked well for you in the past and going back to those strategies that you know have worked well, or like going back to those safe spaces almost and looking back on those things. So for me, it's about breaking things down into more manageable chunks. It's about taking that time to sit and reflect and kind of be in my own headspace, but also to try and get time to chat to friends and family and stuff as well. So yeah, really just looking back at what has worked, and nobody's been in this situation before, but what are those things that give you joy, and how can you best try to replicate those in the current situation, and trying to really kind of mimic those or kind of do them if you can. So that would be how I would try and go about things. So thank you both for taking part in this today. Claire, where can people find out more about you online or kind of get hold of you? If you want to
I'm on Twitter. I'm currently on Twitter, and I have a handle that I set up many years ago, which I now wish I could change the name of, but I can't. And I am at Sick as a Dog, DAWG, on Twitter.
Best Twitter handle ever. Brilliant.
I'm on not just anybody at Instagram, but I'm not on that very much. But yeah, find me on Twitter. Great to meet you.
And
there's some great posts. I love it.
What about you, Evi? Where can people find you online?
Well, you can find me. We started with my awesome colleague and friend Scott, Instagram. And Scott, my fish memory, coronavirus memory state, Bridges
MGMT.
MGMT. I'm so not good at this thing. So yes, it's that. Yeah. So we're there, and we're trying to support any really patients from us patients. Really, it's our voice. So that's where we are, and then on Bridges Instagram.
And your
The
personal
Twitter.
Instagram? Do you have a
And
personal
my
Instagram?
yes, I do. It's yes. It's as seriously, people. This lockdown, as or maybe the accident. Let's blame the illness. SLLUNICKO, and you read it as Sluničko, which means sunshine in Czech language, and that was a nickname given to me by my family.
Oh, I never
that's
knew
so
that.
cool. Yeah.
I know they're very cute, my family. I love them. I miss them.
I'll put the links to everyone's handles in the notes for this episode. Cool. And I am on Twitter at Ballard Ridley, and I'm on Instagram at Dad Can't See as well, which is where I post a lot with me and my daughter messing around.
Yeah, you have to say it's really cute.
One of my favorite Instagrams.
So,
Honestly.
yeah. Thank you very much. And
I want to hug you.
yeah.
I'm hugging you.
Soon, hopefully, every soon we'll all be able to have a hug. And Bridges Self Management. So we are on Twitter at Bridges Self MGMT, and we are also on Instagram, as Evi said, at Bridges Self MGMT. We have a Facebook community of practice. So if you search for Bridges Self-Management Community, so for anyone who's been on any of our courses or would like to come on our courses, if you search for Bridges Self-Management Community, you can find like-minded clinicians. If you want to find out more about what we do at Bridges Self-Management, you can go on our website, bridgesselfmanagement.org.uk. And our podcast. So this is the first episode of our podcast, and hopefully there'll be a lot more of them to come. But you can subscribe on either YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast normally. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.